Welcome, viewers, to my channel again, Colossal Fredmaw, you know me as. Today we're doing the Tarkir Dragonstorm limited guide for the upcoming Magic the Gathering set. But today I'm joined by a very special guest, an Amulet Titan one-trick and local limited player, Jess.
Hey! Nice to meet you all on this YouTube channel. I'm Jess, I play Limited, and I am not just an Amulet Titan one-trick, I also play Lotus Field and Pioneer.
So an Amulet Titan one-trick.
No, combo sicko. But
a combo sicko.
Limited liver as well.
Today we can put aside our differences, because we're both very stoked for this upcoming set. Tarkir was the first set I played for competitive Magic in, like really seriously. It was original Tarkir. It's my favorite plane. And they really are not doing a stupid hat set this time. It seems like they're actually honing in on the things that made Tarkir unique, and the things that make Magic unique and wonderful. And it's like a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, this is my first time drafting what's going to be a true three-color format, so I'm very excited. I've only been playing Magic for about 2.5 years, just after Brothers War, so every mechanic that I've seen so far, every test game that I've played, I'm really excited as a lover of soup decks to be able to play all of my cool cards, splash a bunch of really powerful things, and have some great drafting experiences.
Yeah, as am I. So I'll probably make a few allusions to Streets of New Capenna, because that's the most recent three-color set we've had. But you're coming at this from sort of a fresh lens, so we've got two unique perspectives. We're going to jump right into the table of contents real quick. We're going to talk about the new mechanics first, and then the returning mechanic singular. We're going to talk about the best commons and uncommons in each color to get you prepared.
We have some differences on this, but we are able to compromise. Sure, we'll talk about some of that.
We can do a consensus. And like my normal limited guides, it's intended to be, not going over literally every card in the set, but just if you have an hour and a half to get ready, this would be the best use of your time, is my goal. And then we're going to talk about the limited archetypes, learn what they are, why one of them doesn't work. And then we're going to talk about the best bombs in the set. I put my top 6 rares and my top 6 mythics. We're just going to go over those real quick so you know what to watch out for. And then we're going to talk about some tips and tricks that'll help you just be sort of a cut above at your pre-release, at your draft, at your sealed RCQ, whatever Tarkir Dragonstorm Limited you're going to be playing.
Hey, that's what our goal is, to get you that 3-0, so let's dive in.
Yep, all right. So we're going to start with the new mechanics. We're going to go with the first new mechanic, Endure. And what Endure does is it'll have a number next to it, so it might be Endure 1, it might be Endure 2, Endure 3, etc. And when Endure happens, it'll be done by a specific creature, and you will either put a +1/+1 counter on it or create a spirit token of that size. You'll put that many counters on it or create a spirit token of that size. Something to note about Endure is that, unlike modal spells, the choice that you make is made on resolution. So if the creature gets killed in response to it enduring, you will just make a spirit rather than not get to do anything. That's Endure.
It's a mechanic that I like. It's a lot more flexible than the sort of older mechanic if you have to tap this creature and then it gets a +1 counter, but it gives you a lot of value straight away. There's a lot of uses for these additional tokens in this set, or just having bigger creatures to trade up against combat. So I think it's a quite good mechanic. A lot of flexibility. There's a lot of keywords in this set. It's going to be a little exhausting for some of the newer players.
But they've done a good job of putting reminder text where they can. I don't think it'll be terribly hard to keep track of it, but yeah.
You'll be taking the spirit most of the time.
I think so, yeah, unless the creature has a lot of keywords that you really need. You're going to want to just be putting more bodies on the board rather than bigger ones.
Yeah, there's definitely board stalls where I want this Earth Carver to just be a 7/7 because that'll be bigger than anything else. It's going to block all my opponent's dragons. Yeah. But most of the time, the smaller creatures especially, you'll be taking the spirit tokens.
Yeah. So that's the Absian mechanic, Endure. Next, we're going to talk about the Mardu mechanic, Mobilize. Mobilize also has a number next to it, and it's so Mobilize X. Whenever this creature attacks, create X tapped and attacking 1/1 red warrior creature tokens. Sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step. So this is, there's going to be, as you might guess, a lot of things to do with these tokens in this set that are not just having them hit your opponent or not hit your opponent. A lot of ways to de-incentivize them blocking the tokens, potentially, so you can get in for more of that damage. This is intended to be a very aggressive mechanic. Jess, your thoughts on Mobilize?
Yeah, I'm not certain how Mobilize is going to end up. I love the dragons, I love big spells, I love powerful spells. I know that's something that this set wants to cultivate, and that's an aspect of Magic that players are excited about, and so they want to support. I would like to see the Mobilize deck really be able to come together. I think it's going to be a lot more of a value deck than a closer aggressive deck, especially in like your sealed pools and your pre-releases where you don't have a lot of control over these cards. A lot of like some of these common spells are more enablers than payoffs, so you really want to hit some of these like uncommons that reward you for having these tokens. You know, your sacrifice-based outlets, your pump spells, your anthem effects. That's what's going to make this Mobilized deck good or not. I'm leaning towards it's a little bit underwhelming for me so far. But I really want it to come together so it's not just these board stalls and these splashy things that do a lot of damage. I'd like to have a little bit more interplay in the set.
And we can get more granular about what those Mobilized synergies are when we're talking about the deck rather than the mechanic later. But for now, just what Mobilize is, you're getting those goblins or warriors when you attack. I don't know why I made them goblins. Warriors when you attack, and then you're going to sack them on the end step if they're still around. Next we got Flurry. This is the Jeskai mechanic, and this is returning, although it was unnamed the first couple times it was a keyword mechanic. It was a keyword mechanic in some D&D bullshit, but also in Kaldheim. Not a keyword mechanic, rather, but like a set mechanic. And here they've given it a name, Flurry. So Flurry is simply a trigger that happens when you cast your second spell of the turn. Notably, they don't have to be non-creature spells, just your second spell. Double spelling is a little awkward in a 3-color set where a lot of your mana is coming in tapped and you're wanting to play big spells, and it doesn't feel like it naturally connects super easily with the other clans, so I'm pretty low on this mechanic.
I really, really hate this mechanic. A lot of the cheap spells just aren't good. There's not a whole lot of super great commons or uncommons that are really cheap or that are really able to replace themselves in an effective manner, so I don't think that it's going to be very exciting. We've traditionally had the Spell Slinger mechanic be underwhelming in most formats, and this is really going to be no exception, I think.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think Jeskai is going to be lagging behind a little bit, or it's going to be good because it's borrowing better cards from other clans, or you've hit a bomb.
It's going to be a lot more tempo than True Flurry.
Yeah. And then Harmonize, which is very close to an existing mechanic. Two of these mechanics are very close to existing mechanics. Harmonize is literally just flashback with a little bit of extra text. So instants and sorceries have Harmonize. You may cast this card from your graveyard for its Harmonize cost. You may tap a creature you control to reduce that cost by X, where X is its power, then exile that spell. So not like Convoke, where it's the number of creatures you control, but rather tapping one creature and reducing the cost by its power, only when you're flashing back this spell. Jess, your thoughts?
Love it. I love getting to be able to cast more spells. This is going to be a really grindy format. This is really powerful to me. Even if it's not that great, being able to cast it twice. If some of these harmonized mechanics, like these are some of the better, cheaper spells to try and have some overlap with Flurry, I don't think that's really going to pan out. You just want to cast these spells because they're good.
Yeah, it feels like they played it pretty safe with these designs as far as how powerful the harmonized cards generally are, and that makes sense. Getting to there, it's an automatic 2-for-1 in limited, which is something you have to keep an eye on. But I think a lot of these cards are very cool and relatively powerful. There are definitely going to be board states where you can afford to tap a big guy to bring one of these back. Sometimes you'll just pay the full cost, and it's just like an inefficient flashback spell. I think it's a cool mechanic.
Even just paying the reduction by a 2 or 3, you've got all of these tokens lying around. Maybe you had attacked on a prior turn or something. It's not doing much. You can afford to pay the 2 mana, lose that little bit of tempo loss to be able to double spell on that turn.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on to the Sultai mechanic, Renew. So for those of you who remember a while ago the Scavenge mechanic, this is very similar to that, but it's a little bit more broad. If a creature has Renew, you can pay a cost and exile that card from your graveyard to put some sort of counters on target creature, activate only as a sorcery. So sometimes the creature is going to have a keyword, and it's going to put that keyword counter on the creature. Sometimes it's just going to put +1/+1 counters on that creature. Sometimes a combination of the two, as we see with these 3 different cards. And then, on some rarer mythic designs, there's some weird stuff like putting stun counters or decayed counters on your opponent's creatures, but broadly speaking, you're going to be putting them on your own creatures or your 2-headed giant partner's creatures. And that is going to be, providing keywords and stats for your creatures. I think this mechanic's really cool. I think it's nice that they've explored that scavenge design space in a more robust way. What are your thoughts?
I really like this renew mechanic. I think these games are going to go long. You're going to have a lot of great creatures with keywords that putting counters on them is going to beef them up in really cool ways. I like sort of the overlapping synergies. We've got all this stuff coming out of the graveyard. We've got some self-mill support. So I think it's going to be really strong. I really like Sultai. I love that it's kind of a unique space because so many times we see them just be generic graveyard decks and have not any type of real identity in that Golgari wedge. And this is something that's really unique that hasn't really been done before that I like a lot. It's a lot of value.
Yeah, I think it'll also let blue feel more like a part of the wedge, right? Blue mechanically is kind of hard to get to play nice with the other colors in an interesting way, and especially if this were just a revisit to Scavenge, blue would feel very out of place. But the fact that we're able to put keyword counters and stun counters and stuff on creatures with this mechanic really makes blue feel like more of a natural part of the wedge.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. So, now we're going to talk about Behold. There's only 5 commons and 1 rare with Behold in the set, and this is a mechanic that existed in Dragons of Tarkir, but it wasn't named. And they've named it here, keyworded it so that they can presumably put it on more stuff in the future with less text necessary. But essentially, all of these spells behold a dragon, although you could theoretically behold something else later. In a future set, but essentially just if something asks you to behold a dragon, you either choose a dragon you control or reveal a dragon card from your hand. And it's just a cycle of simple common spells that do something a little bit extra if you beheld a dragon. So, this one gains you some life, this one has flash, this one surveils 2 if you beheld a dragon, and we're going to talk about a lot of these later because they're also pretty powerful commons in the set. But yeah, it's there's a decent number of dragons in the set. There's only 5 common dragons, 1 in each color, and then a good slew of uncommon dragons in each color, and then in off-color omens, which we'll talk about in a second, and then some uncommon wedge dragons. So it's not going to be super easy to make sure you can behold a dragon, but these
they're all really good spells, even if you're not able to behold a dragon. It's just kind of gravy on top of the already really solid cards. It's nice that Wizards is going back and fixing a lot of the keywords that just haven't been keyworded in the past. It's a lot of keywords for new mechanics and for new players that's confusing, but they've done a lot of fixing and cleaning up the rules with the set, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, I think you pointed out how they're good on rate without revealing a dragon, and I think the design task that they put themselves up to by making this set was to deliver on the promise of clans, but also on the promise of dragons, which is just a ton of things to have to put in one set. So the fact that they have, made dragons kind of a sideshow to the clans, I think is correct, because people were more excited about seeing the clans coming back. But the fact that these spells are not taking up a whole card's worth of space in the set, so to speak, because they do something even without that dragon.
Yeah, and the dragons are pretty well supported in all of the clans and colors, which is nice.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of the dragons are just good on rates. You're just going to play it regardless of that type line. And next we've got Omens. This is another one of the dragon-related mechanics, and I want to be very clear that these are not adventures. Someone at your pre-release is definitely going to cast this and put it in their adventure zone. And their opponent might also not know that they're not adventures.
It goes back into your library. It has the reminder text.
It does have the reminder text, which people do not usually read. So.
And also, the ability finishes resolving before it shuffles back.
That's true. So the way that these work is very similar to Adventures, where there's a little spell in the corner of the text box, sorcery or instant. You do that sorcery or instant, and then you shuffle the card into its owner's library. So you are really choosing between doing that omen and shuffling it in, or having that dragon when you cast it, although, of course, when you shuffle it in, theoretically, you can draw it later and either do the omen again or cast the dragon. So, a lot of these are not great on rate because of the flexibility, right? You're not, they're not halves of cards that you would play by themselves typically, but they are, good enough together. So we'll talk about some of these dragons later. But
some of them are really good. There's you can sort of make a tier list of cards that you play for the Omen side, cards that you play for the Dragon side, cards where both sides are bad, and cards where both sides are good.
Yeah, and I think the cards where both sides are good is mostly just the rare and mythic ones.
Yeah, but stuff for this uncommon, I'll play Petty Revenge as a full card. That's not a card that I'm mad to have in my deck. Maybe I have one green source. Maybe I have one green source, so I can maybe cast it if my deck can support that, but I'm not ever mad about having to just pick one side of these sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of them fall into that category. But they're just interesting cards to evaluate, like Adventures, because there's so many different options. So we'll see how those play as the format pans out. And then we've only got one returning mechanic, and I'm just going to rant for a minute because I hate the way that they implemented this in this set. Especially, and I feel foolish because I didn't put the card up on screen, but there's a fight spell that doubles the power and toughness of the creature, and then it fights something, and it's a 2 or a green, 2 or a red, and 2 or a blue, which means that you can cast that double your power and toughness spell and then fight for 2 red-blue. And the way that they do hybrid mana, the spell has to be able to be monocolor in either of the colors that it is. And what I feel like they're implying then with two-brid mana is that if you can eliminate one of those colors, it's not that integral to what the card does. I don't love the designs of some of these. I think Reputable Merchant is pretty fair because, like, you could make an argument that all of those colors can do it. I should probably you go ahead and explain how two-brid mana works.
Yeah, two-brid mana works as you can pay. So this cost. Let's take this Reputable Merchant. It's got 2 white hybrid. For that specific part of the cost, you can pay either 2 mana of any color or colorless, or 1 white mana. And the same for the black and the green. So you can pay it for any combination of a white, a black, and a green. 2 arbitrarily colored mana, a black and a green. Yep. You know, a white, 2 arbitrarily colored mana, and a green.
Yeah. Or if you really don't care about your spells being good on rate, you can pay 6 for this.
You can just pay 6 mana.
And worth noting for, I don't think much cares about it in this set, but the mana value of these cards is 6. If something cares about mana value X or more.
There's like a couple rares and stuff that return stuff from the yard or whatever.
And in standard, there's certain enchantment. But yeah, these are all
this
6
is a limited
drops.
set review.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I'm just having PTSD. There's a cycle of commons and a cycle of uncommons. Most of the commons are pretty bad. Some of the uncommons are like okay, only if you're paying
3 or 4 mana. There's a number. There's a number of the uncommons that I'd pay 4 for. These are just kind of like, I don't even know that I want some of these cards if I'm in those 3 colors exactly.
Right, because like this Gurmag Nightwatch is like fine if I'm playing Sultai, but I'm not going to put this in my Abzan deck because if I'm casting it for black, green, and 2, I feel awful.
Oh yeah, I'm not even really happy to cast that card for Sultai if I happen to have Sultai.
Well, 3 mana 3/3 Surveil 3 is fine, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm not excited about it. Right. It's not a reason to play Sultai.
Yeah, so that's 2-brid mana. It's only on 10 cards in the set, but I think... Yes,
yeah, there's a cycle of commons, cycle of uncommons that all have this.
Yeah, so just keep that in mind, how that works. Next, we're going to move on to the best commons and uncommons in each color, and I think we'll take turns reading each card and then evaluate them together. So I'll go first with the first white common, and then we will... pretty intuitive how this is going to work. So the first white common is Salt Road Pack Beast, 5 and a white for a 4/3 beast. The spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature you control. When this creature enters, draw a card. Fantastic.
White bread and butter common. It's normally going to cost you 3 or 4 mana, ideally 3, but it may frequently be closer to 4. It works great with your mobilized tokens. It's got good stats. It's going to draw you the gas you need to continue to go and close out the game. I want it more in aggressive decks, but I'm happy to play this in really any deck. You want creatures on the board.
Yeah, you mentioned the mobilized tokens. Yeah, for those who aren't aware, they stack on your end step, not at the end of combat. So if you still have some alive in the second main, and you cast this in the second main phase, they're going to contribute to the spell being cheaper. I love Pizza Rhinos. They're my favorite things in a limited format. Usually they're green. I'm not objecting to white having it. But yeah, I think, just a decently sized creature that replaces itself is going to be the backbone of mid-range slop. And I love shoveling mid-range slop onto my playmat.
Yeah, you love mid-range slop. I think this set's going to be a little bit more like MH3, where you're kind of allowed to do the aggro stuff, or you're allowed to do this big, splashy Temur or Sultai stuff, and the Abzan counters mid-range nonsense gets squished in between. I think it's going to end up a little bit more like that. It might be grindy enough to support some counters, archetypes, but...
Not to nearly the extent of MH3, because MH3 just had, 2 decks. It was, Eldrazi...
Yeah, Eldrazi and Boros Energy.
Boros Energy, but I think... I have a hard time seeing the aggro decks coming together. I think this is going to be mid-range slop, and I'm excited for it. And this is how white keeps up with mid-range slop. This is white's version of that. So go ahead and read this next card for us.
Yeah, we got Fortress Kinguard. It's a 1/2, but when it enters, it endures 1, so you have the option of either having a 1/2 and a 1/1, or a 2/3 for your 1 and a white mana cost. It's a creature, it's a dog soldier. There's not a whole lot of typal synergies in this set, but it's a great rate.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's kind of funny that you're the one who ends up reading this because you were
I did not
in love
caught
with
on
this
this
being
card.
one of the top 3 commons, but I mean, you look back at War of the Spark, there was a 2-mana 1/2 in black that amassed zombies won, and it was black's best common. You know, granted, this is years after that, right? I was in college when I wasn't paying rent yet. I was about 80 pounds lighter. But this card is reminiscent of that card from War of the Spark. I think it's quite solid. You know, 2-mana 2/3. If an aggro deck exists, it wants this, right? There's something that's flying around with the bodies. I think this is very defensible as, you know, one of White's best commons.
I think it's going to line... I think this is a card where specifically I'm more excited about just casting it as a 2-mana 2/3, which... Ideally, in those sets, you have some type of upside. It's some type of gold card.
Right?
Yeah.
Dream, you have your Yathan Tomb Guard coming down the next turn and then hitting them with this and drawing a card and burning against Stu going. But I don't think... You know, I think this card has a lot of hidden synergies. And then we've got Rebellious Strike. 1 and white for an instant. Target creature gets +3/0 until end of turn. Draw a card.
This is one you had to convince me on, but I'm a little bit sold on Rebellious Strike. Again, if the aggro deck exists... It's going to want this in as many copies as it can get because the threat of activation makes blocking those mobilized tokens really bad.
Yeah, and that's the core thing about this card, right? Is once you get to the mid-game, your mobilized abilities feel a lot worse because your opponent can just throw their 3/3 or their 4/4 or whatever in front of the token and not have to actually like take the damage, so the mobilize is functionally irrelevant. But the threat of this card coming down and 2-for-1ing them, letting your token that was going to die anyway trade with their thing and draw you a card, is going to let you get extra damage in, and it's also going to happen sometimes, and then it feels great. So yeah, the hidden text on this card is like how busted it is with those mobilized, like for getting those 2-for-1s.
It does. It doesn't help your mobilized creatures live, which is where maybe this falls into some traps.
Toughness is a little rough, but you know, it's not for your mobilized creatures; it's for the tokens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Best uncommon.
Yeah, we're going to talk about White's best uncommons, so you'll start us off reading Descendant of Storms.
Yeah, we've got Descendant of Storms. It just costs 1 white mana, creature, human soldier. Whenever this creature attacks, you can pay 1 and a white. If you do, it endures 1, and it's a 2/1. Yeah, this card's fantastic. I know Clarion Spirit is the traditional card. No, what's the name of that card?
It's Usher of the
Fallen.
Yeah,
it's the other white one drop in that format.
Usher of the Fallen was Boast, make a 1/1. This has a little more flexibility in that you can put a counter on it instead of making the 1/1. Although you do have to do it right when it attacks, which I don't think matters that much. But the ability to pump this up to trade at worst instead of making the 1/1 definitely makes this good. I think if an aggro deck exists in the format, it wants some number of this card for sure.
Absolutely. My one concern with it is there's just a bunch of 2/1s in the format in some of the defensive colors, so this may not be able to attack for particularly long, but...
Sure.
It makes more bodies. If you've got those types of payoffs, you can sacrifice them. It can grow itself. If it's left unanswered for long enough, it will start winning some games.
Yeah, and 3-color sets are just awkward for mana in general, so the fact that you have a mana sink for when you can't necessarily cast the spells in your hand gives this some added utility. Next we're going to talk about Sun Pearl Kieran, and I know this is a limited podcast. A lot of people are talking about this card for a lot of things. It is 1 and a white for a 2/1 Kieran with flash and flying. When this creature enters, return up to one other target non-land permanent you control to its owner's hand. If it was a token, draw a card. So the immediate thing that you think of with this is, quote-unquote, bouncing one of your mobilized tokens that's headed to the graveyard anyway and drawing a card. But there's other text on it. What do you
we've got creatures, we've got that cycle of rare of uncommon Dragonstorm enchantments with enters the battlefield abilities. Mm-hmm. I'm not mad about it on rate anyways. If you want to be holding up some combat tricks, it gives you a lot of flexibility. Mm-hmm. It's a great early attacker because a lot of these dragons, most of the other things in the set that have flying cost 4 or 5 mana, maybe 6.
Right.
So it can get in for a lot of damage. It's a very flexible card.
Down. Yeah, no, I agree. I think those Dragonstorm enchantments, they feel a little weak to me, most of them. But if you have ways to bounce them, that's going to make them feel a lot better to play. And we'll talk about this.
Yeah, we will.
In the podcast.
Third best uncommon, we'll do it ranked, but the last one we're talking about is Loxodon Battle Priest for 4 and a white. Creature, Elephant Cleric. It's a 3/5, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on another target creature you control. That line of text about putting counters on stuff is broken, has always been broken, will always be broken. It doesn't matter if you're in the counter synergy or not. You want your creatures to break board stalls.
Yeah, the big thing here, the downside of mid-range slop is that board states are going to be gummed up a lot, and one of the ways to ungum that board state is to be putting a counter on a creature with a keyword every turn, right? Put a counter on your lifelinker, putting a counter on your flyer, whatever. Eventually you will have good attacks with this Loxodon Battle Priest out in the battlefield, and the body is also great for blocking.
It dodges a lot of removal in this set at that 5 toughness. That's very powerful. This is not your average replacement level 5 drop. This is a premium.
Yeah, for sure. So those are our best white uncommons. Next we're going to talk about blue. Blue's best commons. And I will start with Sibzig Appraiser. Right?
Right? I think so.
Yeah, you did that one. Sibzig Appraiser, 2 and a blue for a 2/1 zombie advisor. When this creature enters, look at the top 2 cards of your library. Put one of them into your hand and the other into your graveyard.
Classic 2-for-1. This card's fantastic. Fred and I were in agreement on all of Blue's best commons. It's got decent stat line. It can trade with a bunch of X2s in the format. They've got good amount of card selection. It synergizes really well both with Harmonize and with the Soul Tie Renew mechanic. The dream is you get a non-creature spell into your hand, and then you bin something else to go to the graveyard. It's card selection. It helps you hit your land drops. This card really does it all for me.
Yeah. You're going to be having a crazy time if you hit a Harmonize or Renew card into the graveyard with this. But that is icing on the cake of a card that you are already happy to play just for the base rate, selecting a card for you, replacing itself. Trade's okay. Yeah, I think this card's good.
Yeah. Second common, Snowmelt Stag, 3 and a blue, creature elemental elk, Vigilance 2/5. During your turn, this creature has base power and toughness 5/2, and then for 7 mana, 5 and 2 blue, this creature can't be blocked this turn.
Yeah, so that last ability is for when you're ready to kill your opponent, right? You need a clock, the board state's gummed up, and it's got you. I do really like the way that this switches power and toughness, because it lets you get in early for a good amount of damage for what blue is normally able to do for 4 mana. But then when it's your opponent's turn, this guy's on blocking duty, great for blocking those 1/1s. Off of Mobilize, dodges the combat trick that we talked about with those by having 5 toughness. Just a big number when your opponent is at sorcery speed, right? Their sorcery speed removal has to deal with this as a 2/5 rather than as a 5/2. So I think the fact that it switches power and toughness is going to be a lot more relevant than it looks.
And a lot of this format is sorcery speed. Most of the instant speed payoffs either aren't that good or are sort of a small subset of removal spells that you kind of know about. I really do like the way that this card plays with Harmonize. That's our next blue common that it synergizes particularly well with, but it can Harmonize, pay for the cost of almost anything. You can do it second main if you're able to attack with it because it's got that Vigilance keyword. There's just a bunch of really, really good things taped to this card.
Yeah, that's a really good point that it harmonizes with 5 power on your turn. Absolutely. Yeah, I didn't think of that. So, Unending Whisper is our next card, speaking of Harmonize. It's a single blue for a sorcery, draw a card, Harmonize, 5 and a blue.
Fantastic. It's drawing 2 cards. If you think about Think Twice, this obviously has a lot higher of a flashback cost and it's not an instant, but it replaces itself. If the double spells archetype is a little bit more real, that deck wants this really highly, but I'm happy to just cycle my cards.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also, 1 mana is a lot easier of a thing to just do randomly at some point in the game. You can squeeze it in compared to 2 on the initial cost of Think Twice. I think this card's very good. Sometimes you're even just going to pay 6 to draw the card the second time, and it doesn't feel terrible to have gotten a 2-for-1 that way. But yeah, I think this card's great. Just the fact that it cycles early and then later harmonizes to draw a card. It's pretty simple.
I mean, in a set full of tapped lands and awkward mana, having something that's very unrestrictive gives you a play when you're lower on mana than you want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to talk about the best uncommons, and you're going to start with this one.
We've got Aegis Sculptor, 3 and a blue, Bird Wizard, Flying, Ward 2. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may exile 2 cards from your graveyard. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. It starts as a 2/3, which is a little bit underwhelming, but if I've put even 1 counter on this thing, I'm not super mad about that. That Ward 2 means it's likely enough to survive back to my upkeep, and if I've put 2 counters on this thing, well then I'm way ahead, and that 4/5 stat line's going to be able to block a lot of things. You really deal a lot of damage. I'm a huge fan of this card.
Yeah, not to mention that there's some leaves your graveyard synergies in this set that are going to compound with this card. That Ward 2 in a format with, even if the removal were like pretty efficient, that Ward 2 really does make your opponent kind of bend their turn around answering this card if they want to do it. And they kind of have to, because it's going to grow in size relatively rapidly. Next we've got Bewildering Blizzard, which I thought I was going to have to argue my case on, but Jess seems to agree with me. So this is 4 and double blue for an instant. Draw 3 cards. Creatures your opponents control get -3/-0 until end of turn. Now, normally we don't like fogs in Limited, and why is that?
Because they don't actually help you win the game. Mm-hmm. It's like you're surviving for 1 more turn, but that's not what most games of Limited are decided by. This Bewildering Blizzard allows you to maybe make some more profitable blocks you would have otherwise. It's refilling your hand. It's giving you a lot more power such that you can survive the turn, but then you can actually turn the corner. Whereas most fog effects don't give you the ability to come back.
Yeah, it is actually putting you in a different position than you were before you cast it by giving you those 3 cards and potentially letting you win some trades, right? They swing, you block, you fire this off, and maybe you're getting some trades. It's maybe a little magical Christmas land to assume this will be like a 5-for-1, but it is possible. And I think that gives this card a lot of, your opponent really has to play around it if you have 6 mana untapped. And then lastly, we've got this last one.
We've got Kishla Trawlers for 2 and a blue. Human Citizen, when this creature enters, you may exile the creature card from your graveyard. When you do, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. 3/2, so not embarrassing stat line at all. There's lots of great instants and sorceries in the set that you want to be playing anyways in any type of blue-based deck, so I'm very happy about this. Your creatures are likely to be trading off early or any of the self-mill synergies that we've got going on. I'm super happy with this. Decent body, gets me my best instant or sorcery, redraw another removal spell, sign me up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this card's great in the late game. Not something you usually want to cast actually on turn 3, so you hopefully have some other options for that. Maybe the removal spell itself that this is going to be returning. Worth noting that since some of the good instants and sorceries in this set are omens, they're not going to be in your graveyard ideally. So, those are a little bit of a non-bow with this, but I think even despite that, the fact that this is, a poor man's Snapcaster Mage, which you always want in Limited because that's an insane 2-for-1.
Yeah.
So moving on from blue, we're going to talk about the best black commons, and I think it is good that I'm reading this one because this is one that you disagreed with me about, but I do think Adorned Crocodile is black's best common creature. It is 4 and a black for a 5/3 Crocodile. When this creature dies, create a 2/2 black zombie druid creature token. And it's got that renew ability. For a black, exile this card from your graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Activate only as a sorcery.
Yeah, I do not like this card at all. I think it's a very, very replacement level 5 drop. Now, sure, it's got a lot of power, but it doesn't have flying. It might trade with, if your opponent were to block with their big flying dragon, for some reason, it's likely going to trade with it, but I don't really care about the 2/2 token, the ability that I can exile it, and now my 2/2 token's a 3/3. Maybe that's a little bit more meaningful, but it feels so replacement level. It's not doing a whole lot to advance my game plan. I'm much more in favor of some other removal spells in black.
Okay. I think it does so many things on one card that it can't be bad. It is a 2-for-1 even if those bodies are not quite on rate. And also it is the most efficient way to just put a counter on a creature if you can get it into your graveyard. Not the fair way, quote-unquote. Just 1 mana to make sure you have a counter on your creature to turn on the things that care about that is pretty relevant. But I think this card's good. I would compare it to the 5/2 that discovers when it dies from Ixalan, which is quite good.
That's fair.
And then you've got...
I've got Feral Deathgorger, 5 and a black, dragon, flying death touch. When this creature enters, exile up to 2 target cards from a single graveyard, 3/5. And then the Omen side is 1 and a black for sorcery, put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature, draw a card. For 1 and a black. I'm much happier a little bit with the Omen side than I am with the Dragon side, because it's an efficient rate for putting a counter on something. It gets to replace itself. It goes back in my library, so I've got this kind of clunky, but it's got Death Touch Dragon. For later in the game, I'm getting my card back. I really like this when there's going to be a lot of power and toughness breakpoints in the set.
Yeah, a lot of people have sort of mused about getting to a point in a game that's so grindy that the only things left in your deck are the omens that you have. You could have like a couple of these and something else, and it's just infinite. Put a +1/+1 counter on a
draw a
creature
card.
for 2 mana, you're drawing the other Feral Death Gorger. That feels great. But in all seriousness, this is good on rate. Exiling cards from a single graveyard is actually a very relevant ETB.
Absolutely.
Given the mechanics of the set. You can hit a renew thing, you can hit a harmonize. Most of those are sorceries, if not all of the harmonized cards.
I think all the harmonized are sorceries.
Yeah, and then the renew cards are all sorcery speed, so it's very useful to be able to exile things from graveyards. And then lastly, we've got Dragon's Prey. 2 and a black for an instant. The spell costs 2 more to cast if it targets a dragon. Destroy target creature. I think this is just your murder for the set, right? This
unconditional
is just,
removal.
Yeah.
If they have a really big dragon, I'm pretty happy to pay 5 mana to get rid of whatever their bomb rare is anyways.
Yeah. I mean, the uncommon dragons are powerhouses too. So this does have the downside of being more expensive when answering that as well. But I think in general, this card is like quite good. I think it's pretty efficient removal. They didn't tow my car, did they? It's like parked right outside.
You shouldn't park there.
Fuck, really?
I don't know. Go look.
Your windows are like glassed or whatever.
Yeah.
We're leaving this in.
Okay.
Can you open the window and see if my car's out there?
I don't actually know how to open this window.
Epic.
Just like step outside.
Okay.
What does your car look like?
The blue Honda Civic. We are experiencing technical difficulties.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Okay, cool. We're leaving that in because this is a very professional podcast. A very professional set review.
Yeah, I can see it from here. Okay.
Yeah, Jess's apartment, little Jess lore, shares a parking lot with a church who are apparently pretty tow happy.
I think it's my apartment complex that would be. I've never seen a tow truck here.
Okay. Yeah, Jess's landlord is a big tow guy. So I didn't see my car outside the window where I thought I had parked it.
No,
but apparently it's fine.
Over to the left a little bit.
All right, black uncommons. You're gonna start us off with 100 Battle Veteran.
Yeah, I'll start us off with 100 Battle Veteran. 3 and a black for a zombie warrior. It's a 4/2. As long as there are 3 or more different kinds of counters among creatures you control, this creature gets +2/+4. You may cast this card from your graveyard. If you do, it enters with a finality counter on it. That first line of text is essentially always going to be flavor text. There's not that many keyword cards to begin with, and most of them are at uncommon, but it's a 4/2. You get to be able to cast it again. It's your classic 2-for-1 situation with decent stats.
Yeah, and I mean, you do just need 1 keyword counter, right? Because a +1/+1 counter, and then the finality counter is a counter. But I think still that's very unlikely to happen. The dream scenario is there's a Vampire Nighthawk at rare that can pass its keywords onto something with renew that turns this on immediately. That's crazy, but that is not a thing that's going to often happen. So I think evaluating this just as a 4-mana 4/2 that you can essentially flash back still makes it one of the best uncommons in the set. I think it's very strong. Trades with something, and then you can just cast it again. Next we've got Krumar Initiate. 1 and a black for a 2/2 human cleric. You can pay X and a black and tap it and pay X life. This creature endures X. Activate only as a sorcery. Now, generally you're going to be choosing the spirit option of that. You don't really need to make this guy big, and then he dies to a removal spell. What are your thoughts on this card, Jess?
I was really low on this card sort of when my initial evaluation of the set, where I thought it was going to be trapped between either you have to do the aggro thing or you have to do the dragons thing. You've started to convince me a little bit more about the existence of mid-range decks in this format as we've been through some of these commons and uncommons and seen how many 2-for-1s are baked into the set. I'm a little bit more of a believer because this is going to break a lot of board stalls. You can make a bunch of small creatures and then pump them with something in the set, or you can make one really big creature. The life total is a lot. The mana to pay is a lot, but it's a really good quality mana sink in a 3-color set.
Yeah, I think in a set that, I mean, I predict this format to be huge on mid-range slop, 2-for-1s. And if I'm correct about that, if this set is like this, games are not really won by the life total. They're won pretty much completely by the board state. So being allowed to turn that life into power and toughness on the board without spending cards is going to be a huge thing to be able to leverage, which is why I think this card is so good. But if I'm wrong about what the format's like, if there are more viable aggro decks than I thought, then, this is going to definitely bump down.
Absolutely. Move us to our third black uncommon, Salt Rolled Skirmish. For 3 and a black, it's a sorcery. Destroy target creature, create 2 1/1 red warrior tokens. They gain haste until end of turn. Sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step. That last bit about the warrior tokens is a nice upside.
Yeah.
Maybe it deals them a couple damage, maybe it doesn't. Maybe you can chain it with something else or have some other synergies. But it's an unconditional removal spell.
Yeah, I generally agree. I mean, especially in a format where there's such powerful, big mana dragons, just having a removal spell that is just 4 mana sorcery deals with it is very valuable. Would love if it said exile, just to deal with, more of the renew stuff, but, there isn't very efficient exile removal in this format.
No, and a lot of the renew stuff isn't super big anyways, so, they want to either trade it off, or it has some other type of downside to it where it'll be hit by other creatures or other answers.
Yeah. I think if you look at a set like Duskmourn or something that had that graveyard synergy, normally they do put some cheaper removal spells that exile, and they haven't really done that here, which I think means that they really want you to play with that graveyard synergy. So next we will move on to the red commons, and Jess, I know this is one of your favorites, but I will be reading it. It is Rescue Leopard, 2 and a red for a 4/2 cat. Whenever this creature becomes tapped, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card.
Card's great. It's card selection. It has a very simple mana cost, decent stat line, 4 and a 2. It does synergize with Harmonize. Notably, if you tap it to harmonize something, you still get the ability to discard a card and draw a card. Card selection is even more important in a 3-color set when you've got a lot of bombs. I love this cat.
Yeah, I pretty much entirely agree. That being able to loot when you harmonize, being able to toss a harmonized card to the loot, and harmonize it next turn, very good. But even just swinging, looting, and trading this, it has far done its job as a 3-drop.
Absolutely.
And that's sort of almost the floor. I mean, aside from it getting removed before you get to attack with it.
Yeah. Next common.
Yeah. Molten Exhale. Sorry, that's you.
Yeah. 1 and a red, sorcery. You may cast the spell as though it had flash if you behold a dragon as an additional cost to cast it. Molten Exhale deals 4 damage to target creature or a planeswalker. This kills most things in the set. The ability that you can do it at flash speed is very nice. It kills everything but the biggest dragons, basically, and a couple of the larger ground blockers. It's fantastic. It's super efficient. Whether you're an aggressive deck that needs to kill a blocker before it gets bigger, or just some type of scary thing, I love this card. I think it's maybe one of the best commons in the set.
Yeah, I think I would broadly agree with that. I think the number, if you are an aggro deck that needs to kill a blocker, then that dragon part's largely flavor text, but also you're going to be casting this more at sorcery speed in that case anyway. I think the card's very solid. I think even if you ignore the Behold a Dragon text, which I think is how you have to evaluate these to see if you're willing to play them, the card's still very solid. 4 damage for 2 mana is a great rate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we've got Seize Opportunity. 2 and a red for an instant. Choose one. Exile the top 2 cards of your library. Until the end of your turn, you may play those cards. Or, up to 2 target creatures each get +2/+1 until end of turn. So much modality on this, right? So many different things you can do with it. You can break parity on card advantage. You can turn your opponent's sort of mindless blocks of your mobilized creatures into trades, or you can turn their mindless failure to block your mobilized creatures into lethal damage. So, this is a Boros charm. So, put it in your lap. Pick it up in the middle of a game off of your lap. Switch it out for one of the cards in your hand and do 4 damage to your opponent's face.
Do not do that. We do not condone cheating in this channel. To be clear, as a legal disclaimer.
Right, very topical. That's not going to let this video age very well. But I guess it's a limited guide for a set, so it doesn't need to age well. We love the NRG series.
Yeah. Card's great, a lot of modality. Either you want to draw some more gas or be able to absolutely blow somebody out. With these mobilized tokens, it gets a lot better. But any type of combat trick, just the existence of this gives you a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And if they don't fall for the combat trick, you get to just essentially draw 2 cards, depending on the point of the game that you're at. So those are our best red commons. Now we're going to talk about the best red uncommons, and Jess, you're going to lead us off with this one that you sort of fought to include.
I did fight to include Shocking Sharpshooter, 1 in a red. It's a human archer. Reach. Whenever another creature you control enters, this creature deals 1 damage to target opponent, and it's a 1/3. We normally see Impact Tremors variants play pretty poorly in Limited, but I think this set is going to be the exception to that. It's a creature to begin with. The reach is nice, so you can trade it for some life later in the game, but with all of these mobilized tokens, this is a great way to turn them into value, whether that's in board stalls. You don't even have to attack for your mobilized token. Well, I guess the mobilized creature has to attack.
Yeah. This doesn't have to attack.
This doesn't have to attack.
Yeah, the mobilized mechanic is going to let you churn bodies onto the floor, or onto the battlefield with an efficiency that we only really see in, like, the set with Decayed, or, like, the rat tokens that couldn't block an Eldraine. Like, the creature has to be worse than a 1/1 for you to be able to put them onto the battlefield that efficiently, but this set has that, which is going to make an Impact Tremors style card feel even better. And I remember we would play Impact Tremors from the bonus sheet sometimes in Wilds of Eldraine if we were really good at making rats. So then this seems like much of a lower ask than including actual Impact Tremors, because it is, like you said, a body.
Yeah, or if any type of combat trick works well with it, the counters, there's a lot of ways to buff creatures to make this something that's a little bit more impressive on its own.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Color Pie Alert, we got Sunset Strike Master, 1 in a red for a 3/1 human monk that makes me irrationally angry by tapping for a red with no condition on what you have to spend the mana on or when you can get it. And then 2 in a red tap, sacrifice this creature. It deals 6 damage to target creature with flying. So this is how red is meant to deal with some of those dragons, but it's also how red is meant to compete with the other decks doing big mana stuff, doing mid-range.
Yeah,
Jess, what are your thoughts?
I love this card. I think Temur is going to be one of the stronger archetypes in the set. So the ability to churn out my own dragons earlier and then kill my opponent's dragons, seems great. The 3/1 doesn't line up super well into a lot of the tokens, but if I'm attacking with it for a turn, and then I cast my dragon, and then it's a removal spell taped to the end later,
Yeah, I mean, this card has too much flexibility to be bad. We can tell this far into the review that Jess is pretty dragon-pilled, so you are, judging this card on how well it helps you cast your dragons, which it does. It does help you cast your dragons.
Or double spell, or whatever.
If you opened a Jeskai Bomb Rare, so you have to be in Jeskai, this will help you maybe double spell.
If I open a Jeskai Rare, I'm playing Temur and I'm splashing white for my Jeskai Rare.
There you go.
I'm playing soup.
It's a hot take, but it probably checks out. Yeah. Spoiler alert, we're going to talk about the seeded pre-release packs later. Probably don't pick Jeskai. And then lastly, you've got this one. It's a dog riding a spider.
Zurgo's Vanguard. 2 in a red, creature dog soldier. So it is riding that spider. Mobilize 1. This creature's power is equal to the number of creatures you control, and it's got 3 toughness. So it's one of those payoffs, printed at uncommon for having a large number of creatures. It helps itself survive and continue to attack mobilize because it's going to have such a higher power.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So this is attacking it at the very least as a 2/3. And, that is... I guess if they can, remove something in combat, they can mess this up, but the likelihood that will matter is quite low. I think this card's very solid if that aggro deck's going to exist, right? Shocking Sharpshooter.
Yeah,
curving,
say that 3 times fast.
Schick Hydro Charter into Zurgo's Vanguard is going to be kind of the dream for that aggro deck. This card seems very solid. And then the last color, and definitely the best color, green. We're going to start with Disute Earthcarver. 5 in a green for a 4/4 Elephant Druid with Reach. When this creature enters, it endures 3, which means that you're either getting this 4/4 Reach and a 3/3, or you're getting a 7/7 Reach. Unless they have a big dragon you gotta block, I think you're going to be going for the 3/3, which just makes this insane on rate. Green 6-drops keep getting better and better because they have to make the 6-drop common worth paying 6 mana for in increasingly aggressive and increasingly powerful limited formats. And this card is no exception to pushing that envelope. Jess, what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. I think this is another exception to the Endures rule where I'm maybe more excited about having this as a 7/7. If my opponent's not in white or black or not as much into that, they don't have any removal spells that can kill this thing.
Yeah.
Well, if they don't have if their removal is damage based, this is going to be, it could be the biggest thing on board. Blocks.
Trade favorably at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're on the same page about this card being great, and I think it's pretty self-evidently great, right? You'll want to take note of making sure that your opponent can't get this in an awkward spot with the 3/5 flying Death Touch or a 4/5 flyer. There's a couple of those, but yeah, broadly speaking, this card's going to do a lot of work. You're going to want to play any number of these in a later game green deck.
Yeah, my personal favorite for best green comment is the
you
next
gotta sell
card.
me on this one.
Sagu Wildling. Okay, it's 4 and a green for a dragon with flying. When this creature enters, you gain 3 life, 3/3. But what I'm really excited about is this Omen half, Roost Seek for a green, sorcery. Search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle.
Okay.
You're playing this for the Omen half. It's
You're
a great
playing this
piece.
for the Omen
I'm
half.
playing
I'm not
this for
playing
the. I'm playing this for the Omen half. That's an incredible, great rate. Any type of green-based deck. Get your basic land card. You're going to fix your mana. It shuffles back. It's not the worst creature in the world. It's not a dragon that's particularly exciting because it is understated compared to everything else. But in any type of ways, if you have dragon payoffs or if you have abilities to make this dragon a little bit more exciting, I think mana fixing is going to be at such a premium with all of these commons that this is going to make your deck function so much smoother because of this ability to search up a basic land.
Yeah, I think. So I'm kind of comparing this to Bushwhack from the Brothers' War, right? Where the alternative mode to finding the basic and fixing your mana was a fight spell for 1 mana, which is a great rate. Instead of a fight spell, you're getting a 5 mana 3/3 flyer that gains you 3 life. I'm not saying that it has to be Bushwhack, but I think this is far enough from Bushwhack that I'm not super thrilled to be playing it. That said, it's a 3-color set. This is going to find my other basics potentially, and then shuffle itself back into the deck, which if I want that, I'm trying to think later in the game, do I want to give myself a 5 mana 3/3 flyer to draw later? And not necessarily.
It's better than a land, it's better
Sure.
than a lot of things, it's better than my 2 or 3 drops.
Okay, yeah. Time will tell. Maybe I'll be proven wrong and this card's actually quite good, but yeah, I'm willing. I can see it. And then next we've got Piercing Exhale. This is another one of those Exhale cycle where you behold a dragon. It's 1 and a green for an instant. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you may behold a dragon. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature or planeswalker. If a dragon was beheld, surveil 2. So looking at that, behold cost as flavor text, this is still quite good. We always like to play the 2 mana instant bite spell in limited. Always feels fine. With that said, the behold a dragon text, I think maybe being a little more difficult in green than in most colors.
Hey, points for Sagu Wildling there again.
Sure, if Sagu Wildling is good, then this card gets better. That Surveil 2 is very relevant, especially in a set with Renew, in a set with Harmonize, just being able to dump those things into your graveyard to maybe, gain advantage off of as early as the following turn is very relevant.
Yeah, and there's a lot of Death Touch creatures in this set as well. There's a common at black for 3 mana that's got Death Touch with Mobilize. There's a green uncommon that we're about to talk about. There's, some of the red creatures have that 4/2 cat. So there's a lot of things that synergize really well with this bite spell specifically that I'm excited about it. No matter what color pair you're kind of in.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think generally this ranks among the better 2 mana instant bite spells, and we're always happy to play those. Speaking of green creatures with Death Touch, why don't you read this one for us?
Yeah, Dragon Sniper for a single green mana, Human Archer, Vigilance, Reach, Death Touch. 1/1. That's a ton of keywords.
I love these clean designs where it's just, stats and keywords. And I think this is one of the better ones. It makes their attacks very bad. It can also ping in without having to think about it early in the game. And then, it stays there to trade with a dragon if they don't answer it, which is, providing just a ton of utility. Yeah, I think those are 3 powerful keywords.
It's incredibly powerful. Vigilance is the least exciting one because you're not really able to attack the 1/1 that profitably.
Unless
and
they're
they're
okay with whatever they can trade with it. And you would rather be the one dictating the terms of that trade by leaving it up to block.
Yeah, or to draw your fight spell later in the game, or bite spell.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we've got Traveling Botanist, 1 and a green for a 2/3 Dog Scout. Whenever this creature becomes tapped, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you may reveal it and put it in your hand. If you don't put the card into your hand, you may put it into your graveyard. So, just the fact that, if this can safely attack, it gets to do this is really useful, right?
It's a great attack trigger.
At the worst, but often just grabs you a land.
It's Explore, but without the counters, and I know the counters matter a lot for Explore for those of you who played LCI, but it's a 2/3 for 2 mana. I'm so much more excited about this than that white common that's a 1/2 Endure 1, but fetching a land, being able to surveil, Harmonize, the Renew mechanic, there's great stuff going on. This also does trigger if you tap it to Harmonize. You're not going to be doing that fairly frequently because it's only got 2 power, but it is an option.
Right, and it might be doing that to cast a 5 mana Harmonize cost is not super unreasonable. I think this card's great. And then you're reading the next one, I believe?
Last one. Inspirited Vanguard, 4 and a green, human soldier. Whenever this creature enters or attacks, it endures 2, and it starts as a 3/2. So the first time it attacks, it can become a 5/4, which is normally big enough to ensure that it can survive long enough to keep making 2/2s every single turn it attacks.
Yeah, and on the turn that you're ready to attack with it, if you have a removal spell so they can't block with it, it gets really nasty. This spell, I think, snowballs out of control a lot faster than I think people will realize that it does. So I'm pretty bullish on Inspirited Vanguard, personally. Yeah, it's going to start making 2/2s as soon as it doesn't need to put counters on itself, which is so much better.
Which is generally, once it's a 5/4, 5/4 versus 7/6, maybe you'll take that second counter set, but lots of 2/2s.
Typically it is going to start making 2/2s at that point, All right, so those were the best commons and uncommons of each color. We're going to go over the limited archetypes next, but first I would like you to, comment, let us know if you feel like we missed anything, or if you agree or disagree with any of our hot takes about the commons and uncommons. Again, feel free to like and subscribe. I hate asking for that, but I do appreciate it. And make sure to let us know in the comments what you agree or disagree with. With that said, we're going to jump into the limited archetypes. We're going to read you the gold cards, and then we're just going to discuss what we feel like the archetype looks like. So the best clan is first. We're going to discuss Abzan Endure. I'll read this first card, Armament Dragon. You'll read the next card, and then we'll have a little dialogue. So Armament Dragon, 3 white, black, green for a 3/4 dragon of flying. When this creature enters, distribute 3 +1/+1 counters among 1, 2, or 3 target creatures you control. Worth noting, it does not say other, so you can just have a 6 mana 6/7 flyer, although, it does make me a little nervous to put all my eggs in one basket, but that is an option, so the floor of that card is there.
Yeah, next gold card, Skirmish Rhino. It costs a white, 1 black, and 1 green, so just one set of Abzan. Rhino, it's got Trample. When this creature enters, each opponent loses 2 life, and you gain 2 life. It's a 3/4. This is Siege Rhino minus a little bit, very clearly.
Homage to one of my favorite Magic cards of all time, Siege Rhino, of course. This card doesn't really synergize with the rest of the clan.
No, not at all.
It's just good. Right? It's just a good card. It synergizes by being strong. And I think the Abzan deck in general is going to be sort of in the middle of... I mean, this is all mid-range, but you got Mardu, the most aggro-leaning mid-range, and then I think Temur is probably the most late-game leaning mid-range deck. And I think Abzan lands right about in the middle. And I think... The Endure mechanic is very flexible, and Abzan being able to care about counters and tokens lets you have sort of a big tent as far as the cards you're able to put into your deck in a draft. I'm hungry, I can steal this Counters Matter card from the Sultai player, and I can steal these Token Matters cards from the Mardu players. My deck is just very versatile in terms of what cards I'm able to take advantage of, which I think gives this a huge advantage in Limited.
Yeah, I've made pretty clear how I feel about the Abzan clan and some of these counters mechanics, because putting counters on things can get blown out by removal spells. I don't know that they're really going to show up to the power level of some of the bigger spells in the format, but...
So you're feeling pretty low on Abzan?
I'm not super low on Abzan. Not nearly... Okay, obviously Jeskai's terrible, and we'll talk about that. But... Either Abzan or Mardu is going to be good, but not both of them.
We're going to feel really stupid if the 17 lands data reveals that Jeskai is the only thing that's playable in this format.
No, I think, yeah.
But I'm pretty confident we're right.
No, either Abzan or Mardu is going to be good, not both of them.
Oh, interesting. Okay, that's a hot take. I do think that if you're right about that, it is definitely Abzan that's going to be good. But We'll see. They are definitely trying to eat each other's lunch a little bit more than it feels like the other clans are. But we'll see. So with that said, I've put in some slides to talk about between the clans. This is always awkward to format, so if you have any suggestions about how to better format these 3 color sets, go ahead and leave them in the comments. But I've put the unifying enemy color pair between each clan in the video, so we can talk about what sort of unifies them. So we're going to talk about black-green counters, which will lead us into a discussion of Sultai. So I'll read this Stalwart Successor first. It's 1 black and a green for a 3/2 human warrior with menace. Whenever 1 or more counters are put on a creature you control, if it's the first time counters have been put on that creature this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. So that's going to synergize with your renew abilities. It's going to synergize with when you endure. Obviously, it's just a pretty flexible card, and then you'll read the other gold 2-color card, which beautiful art by Annie Stagg, by the way. I gotta say, this is one of my favorite Magic pieces already. It's so pretty.
Host of the Hereafter. It is 2, a black and a green, zombie warlock. This creature enters with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. Whenever this creature or another creature you control dies, if it had counters on it, put its counters on up to 1 target creature you control. Base stats 2/2, so it comes in as a 4/4. When it dies, it's already putting 2 creatures on something else. You're moving counters around. It says, good luck trying to deal with my creatures. As long as I have something else, I'm getting value out of that.
Yeah, this card, even if you pretend it's in a set with, 0 other synergy and you try to analyze it in a vacuum, a 4/4 for 4 that just puts 2 +1/+1 counters on something else when it dies is great. Yeah, so compound that with the fact that this set also has Renew and Endure, and you're looking at a card with, so much more upside than it appears, and it already appears quite good. But with that said, I'm going to give a quick disclaimer about how I feel like draft is going to work in this set. You're going to want to try to start in, and we'll talk about this later, but you're going to want to try to start in an enemy color pair and move into a clan later. And black-green counters feels like the one that I want to start in the most, personally, because these cards are just so good on rate, and it's not asking that much of me to just take Renew cards, take Endure cards, and decide if I'm going to be in Sultai or Abzan later.
Or both.
Right. Jess, I think, is a little more bullish on the 4-color soup decks than I am, which those panned out to an extent in New Capenna, and I do think that this set is a little more friendly to them than New Capenna was. So, I'm not saying that those are going to happen never. I think what it'll often look like is, you have an 8-man draft, you're going to have 5 or 6 of your drafters just in a clan, and then 1 to 3 of your drafters in either 3-color or just a 2-color pair with maybe a very light splash. 4 colors or just a 2-color pair with maybe a light splash. I really hope that it's not everyone's in 4 colors because that, I like slop, I don't like soup.
No, but a lot of the power level of the set is contained in these 2 or 3-color cards, and so if you can exploit that at your draft table or in your pre-release, that's something you should try and do. But if the aggressive decks are good, or if these counters decks are faster than they appear to be, that can definitely be punished.
Yeah, I'm not saying I think you're going to end up being wrong. I'm saying I hope you're going to end up being wrong. But yeah, I don't think it'll be super 4-color soup. But all that aside, the black-green counters synergies are very strong and give you a very firm base to move into either Abzan or Sultai, or both.
Absolutely. This is definitely stronger counters cards that have been printed in any other set that I've seen that synergizes with counters. These cards are just way better on rate.
Yeah, and they're screaming at you what they want you to do, which I feel like is something that some of the color pairs do not do as good of a job at, as we'll see as we get into them. But with that said, let's move into Sultai, which is built around the Renew mechanic. So each of the clans gets a dragon. At uncommon, that's all 3 of its colors, and for Sultai, it is Keru Goldkeeper. 1, a black, a green, and a blue for a 3/3 dragon with flying. Whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard during your turn, create a treasure token. And Renew, 2 black, green, blue. Exile this card from your graveyard. Put 2 +1/+1 counters and a flying counter on target creature. Activate only as a sorcery, so sort of a build-your-own dragon from the graveyard.
Absolutely, and the treasures that you're making are going to help pay for these more expensive things. Your renew costs are pretty expensive.
Or your greedy splash.
Yeah. Or my greedy splash.
If you're Jess. Or Jess's greedy splash is going to be paid for by this Carpool Goldkeeper's triggers. I don't think it's that realistic to trigger this. I think you want to just look at it as a 4-mana 3/3 flyer with that renew ability.
There's a lot of ways to have cards leave your graveyard. That's the mechanic I'm most excited about. That's something we talked to Teamer, but I want to play whatever, either Sultai or Teamer, but base Simic is where I'm at.
Yeah, so with that said, this other uncommon I think is absolutely insane.
Broken. Lie in wait. Black, green, blue, sorcery, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Lie in wait deals damage equal to that card's power to target creature. So for anyone who played OTJ and played the card back for more, now granted that was also a reanimation spell, it brought it back to the battlefield, it was an instant, but it cost 6 mana. This reads extremely much like that card to me, because you're getting your card back and you're dealing a bunch of damage to something. It's beautiful. It's everything I could ever want. I'm happy to splash this. I was happy to splash back for more.
The problem with those raised dead effects often is that you're kind of taking a turn off to gain card selection from bringing something back to your graveyard, and this does not make you do that. Notably, right? Now, it is lion weight doing the damage, so, you don't get any lifelink off the creature, you don't get any death touch off the creature, whatever. Marginally relevant, but you look at something like Eternal Witness, and you play that in most limited formats, and I think this is a little bit better, right? Because if instead of the body, you're getting a removal spell,
absolutely.
You just have to return a creature, which is, I think this card is insane. I think it's very good. I think it's defensible to pick this in pick one, even though it is 3 colors. I think it's very, very high quality card. Yeah, so Sultai, by doing that renew mechanic, cares about counters, but it also cares about things leaving the graveyard. So I'm going to read Kishla Skimmer. This is a green and a blue for a 2/2 Bird Scout with flying. Whenever a card leaves your graveyard during your turn, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. So this is, obviously going to trigger off Renew, it's going to trigger off Harmonize, it's going to trigger off of any of your things that bring something from your graveyard back to your hand, which there are quite a few of. I don't think it's terribly hard to trigger this, and if you trigger this once, you're going to feel pretty good.
I'm pack one, pick one in this card.
Okay. Talk more about why.
I think that, A, it's a great rate. It's a 2-mana 2/2 flyer. B, there's tons of ways to trigger cards leaving my graveyard. I think this format's going to be long and grindy. I'm really happy with both the Teamer and the Sultai mechanics. I get to draw a bunch more cards to continue fueling my synergies, to continue fueling my outs. I get to draw either my lands or my big spells, so drawing cards is better than card selection. I'm hugely happy with this card.
Okay.
It does everything I want it to.
I'm not as high on it as you are. I do think it's quite good. I think asking for cards to leave your graveyard is a meaningfully bigger ask than asking for you to put counters on things. So if I'm going into a Sultai deck, I think I'll feel safer starting from the point of green-black and caring about counters than I will from starting from the point of Simic and caring about things leaving the graveyard. But this card is individually powerful. I think this card has a higher ceiling and a lower floor than the counter synergies.
For sure, but I think, the graveyard effect is well supported in the set.
Before we get too far into talking about the synergies, let's make sure we read the other signpost.
There's the other signpost in common. A rural procession, green and a blue, instant, return target card from your graveyard to your hand.
Yeah, and this card is just much more generically good, right? It doesn't really ask anything of you. It's just, you've been milling, you've been playing cards, you've been trading creatures. Get back the best one on your opponent's end step and then cast it immediately on your turn.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah, just a great card. So with all that said, right... I do think this set has a ton of enablers that are just good enough anyway that put things in your graveyard. We talked about the Sibzig,
Sibzig Appraiser.
Sibzig Appraiser, thank you. And we've got Einok Wayfarer on the screen right now. Those are examples of pretty good cards that mill you, and those are going to give you a lot of synergy with this particular deck.
Absolutely. Whether that ends up being your base Simic, whether it's Teamer, whether it's Sultai, and all of these renew mechanics, you've got a lot of great options to get stuff back from a graveyard. There's not a lot of graveyard hate in this format. There was that Feral Deathgorger that we talked about earlier that can only hit 2 cards. They do have... A lot of these cards have clauses about leaving your graveyard during your turn, but most of it's sorcery speed anyways, with the exception of a Rural Procession. So I'm not too mad about that. There's no one...
Skimmer your turn only?
I believe so.
Oh, okay.
So there's not a lot of ways to really be punished for trying to do this graveyard thing, and there's enough power level differences between the best cards in the set and the worst card that I'm interested in recurring them as much as possible.
Yeah, like I said earlier, a lot of times when set has graveyard synergies, they do try to make more of the removal exile, or like they put
They didn't
a
really do
rare,
that.
like, ghostly vacuum in there, but this set does not. Yeah, it seems like they really want you to feel more safe going for these graveyard synergies than they usually do. So with all that said, we are going to talk about the Teamer, because we've bridged the gap between the Teamer and Sultai with Simic. So we will start with Mammoth Bellow, which I will read. And I put them in the opposite order this time. That's going to bother me. Normally, with the other ones, I put the dragon first. But Mammoth Bellow is a sweet card. 2 green, blue, red for a sorcery. Create a 5/5 green elephant creature token, and then it harmonizes for 5, a green, a blue, and a red. Before I analyze this card, I want to make it clear we're not torturing any puppies. Jess has some appliance in their apartment that
It makes this noise.
sounds like someone was hitting a dog with a stick. And it's
Something in my water heater. Something in my water heater is messed up.
Is it that there's a dog swimming in it and fighting for its life as it's being boiled?
I don't think so.
That's what it sounds like. Hopefully the mic's not picking that up. If the mic's not picking that up, this won't make any sense. Mammoth Bellow.
It harmonizes with the creature
It's good
token
on
you just
rate.
made.
It harmonizes
yeah.
and makes another elephant even on the next turn.
2 5/5s. The game has swung in your favor.
It's so good.
No.
Read this and
Read this absolutely insane busted Kara Kick Guardian. Yeah.
I'm gonna make fun of you no matter how you
I'm
pronounce
aware
it.
of this.
So
Carrot Cake Guardian, we're sticking with that.
Guardian.
Yeah, you do love Carrot Cake, huh?
No, I hate it. It's the worst card that I've ever had to register in a standard deck. I can't wait to replace it with a card from this set, actually.
Okay.
It feels so clunky.
Well, Carrot Cake Guardian costs 3 green, blue, and red. It's a dragon. Flying Vigilance Trample. This creature has hexproof if it hasn't dealt damage yet. 6/5. This card's a mythic uncommon.
Yeah, well, I mean, it literally is, because basically this
is.
card was a mythic in M19. It was a legendary. It had 1 more toughness, and that was, like, literally the difference.
Yeah.
And it was Naya instead of Teamer. But all that to say, yeah, this card's great. It's pretty much guaranteed to get in at least once, and then after that, they still have to have the removal spell for it. Yeah.
It's got triple. It's got vigilance. Yeah. What more could you ever really possibly want from this?
3 great keywords and another great keyword. Yeah. Not much to really read there. We're gonna move on to what I think is kind of the clumsier part of the set. The bridge between Teamer and Jeskai. I think Teamer is going to be strong because it's able to be held up just on the strength of the overall card quality. I think Teamer cares the least of all of the clans about asking you to do a specific thing, because the harmonized cards are ultimately just 2-for-1s. And the Teamer deck is just like ramp into big creatures and do combat with them. So it can have some breathing room in terms of what it bridges the gap with, and it uses that to bridge the gap with what I think we both agree is the most fraught clan, the most disappointing design clan.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the blue-red cards first. There's a blue-red what's supposed to be a tempo deck that cares about you casting 2 spells in a turn, but these Signpost Uncommons are not being as clear with what they want you to do as I feel like the other, and more than any of the other 2-color Signpost Uncommons, it feels like there's very clearly just a Jeskai one and a Teamer one. And what I think is supposed to be the Jeskai one is this Effortless Master. 2 a blue and a red for a 4/3 Vigilance Menace. So great keywords. This creature enters with 2+1/+1 counters on it if you've cast 2 or more spells this turn. So if you cast another thing and then cast this.
That last line of text is basically flavor text. I'm happy to just play this as a 4-mana Vigilance Menace 4/3. That's, like, fine on rate, but I'm not excited about it. Maybe there's, some 1-drops that I can play with this and play this on turn 5 and make it.
Yeah,
it's
best
just
case
fine.
scenario, am I saving my Harmonize 1-mana draw card spell to play on turn 5 to make this a 6/5? Especially when I can't even guarantee that my land's going to come untapped and let me do that on turn 5. This card just feels like, are you okay with playing a 4-mana 4/3 Vigilance Menace?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, it's alright. Those are good keywords. I'm not gonna...
It's way better than any common most of the time.
I mean, I'm not thrilled about this card. A card that I am a little higher on...
Glacial Dragon Hunt. Blue and a red, sorcery, draw a card, then you may discard a card. When you discard a non-land card this way, Glacial Dragon Hunt deals 3 damage to target creature, and it's got Harmonize for 4, a blue and a red. So yeah, efficient removal spell, card selection, Harmonize...
Yeah, this card is good. I wish it weren't blue-red. just because like this color pair seems to be suffering a little bit in this set. But the card is very strong, right? This is a credit to its color pair at the very least. The card selection is very powerful. That's a reflexive trigger, so it doesn't fizzle. Like, you don't have to target until after you've discarded the card. You also don't have to discard a card. Like, you can just cycle this if there's nothing to use the removal spell on, which is not exactly where you want to be, but it's
got Harmonize if you end up cycling it. Then...
Right, you can cast it later if there's something. Or, like, maybe you're using this as removal the first time, and then the second time there's nothing that you can remove with 3 damage, so you're just drawing a card, trying to turn through your deck. This card's fine. With that said, we'll move into Jeskai. Jess's facial expression.
Yeah, just look at the cards that were on the prior screen.
Smelling a poop.
Those cards were bad.
Yeah, I'm going to start with Jeskai Brushmaster, which is 1 a blue, red, and a white for a 2/4 Orc Monk with double strike and prowess. Those are good stats. Those are good keywords. But you got to play Jeskai to get them, and...
Yeah, your base is it, and you're splashing out of that, maybe?
Yeah.
For some of these cards, if you have a lot of these cards, like Jeskai Shrinekeeper, the other one, 2, and Jeskai Dragon, Fly and Haste, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you gain a life and draw a card. Like, these are good spells.
I will say, I don't want to breeze past Jeskai Shrinekeeper, because this is my favorite of the dragons. I think it immediately replaces itself in 99% of board states, which is something to be said. And that if they don't answer it, it's drawing you another card, right? I do think Jeskai Shrinekeeper is quite powerful. That is another one where it's like, this is a reason why I'm maybe playing Jeskai. Jeskai Brushmaster, I think the only real use case for it is in a Boros deck where you're splashing blue, because this guy makes really good use of all your combat tricks.
He's also really hard to block.
Right.
Your opponent, you throw a 1/1 or you do not block him at all, and then there's enough pump spells in the set that something, does +3/+0, well,
sure.
Now we're into standard mice deck territory.
Right, well, I don't think the standard mice deck can play a 4-drop, but it's certainly going to feel like the play patterns of that when you're in limited dealing with this card. But yeah, I think Jeskai Shrinekeeper is quite a powerful card, but like just the leap of faith you have to take to be in this deck compared to starting in one of the safe good color pairs and going into one of the safe good clans versus like I first picked this Jeskai Shrinekeeper and I have to build a deck around it does not feel good, or I somehow ended up in a deck that wants to play this because like my card quality was high in these colors. That's hard for me to see happening. So we're both quite low on the Jeskai deck, but if you are a big Jeskai defender,
I'd love to see the deck come together, or to see examples of trophy decks in this if you're just playing good cards, or if you actually manage to trigger the flurry mechanic because you have 17 copies of Endless Whispers. I would love to see that.
Then what are the other cards in your deck? Like, you have to put creatures that win the game in here, like this Equilibrium Adept or whatever. And, like, the couple good cards with the Jeskai mechanics I just see getting eaten up by Teamer and Mardu
That's
players.
true.
Yeah. Speaking of which, we're going to talk about Boros next.
Let's go.
So first we've got Red-White Go Wide. And this contributes, like, this is mostly just, like, a subset of the Mardu cards.
Yeah,
right?
there's nothing...
Mobilized synergies. You can kind of argue that it synergizes with Jeskai in that, like, if you're casting 2 cheap creatures, like, that's going to trigger Flurry. But the first card we've got is this Frontline Rush. Red and a white for an instant. Choose 1, create 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens, or target creature gets +XX until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control.
Efficient making use of bodies, early game, late game, fantastic combat trick, or surprise lethal them for 6 damage.
Right, with a really really powerful with the mobilized cards, right? Because the tokens are still going to count for this pump spell as long as you cast it before they die in combat, which obviously you would because you need to deal damage to your opponent. I don't know why I said that. So this card's very powerful. I think shout out to this Storm Beacon Blade. I think this card's really sweet, and it's worded so that it does trigger with Mobilize, unlike most cards that do that kind of thing. But yeah, the Red-White Go Wide deck seems decent. I don't think I like it as much as the Black-White Aristocrats sort of deck, which we'll talk about momentarily, but yeah, Frontline Rush is fine. Here's the other Red-White card, which is just a Jeskai card.
Corey Mountain Stalwart, 1 red-white, Human Monk, Flurry. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, this creature deals 2 damage to each opponent and you gain 2 life, 3/3. I'm just playing this card in Boros.
I don't know if
It's a 3-mana 3/3, and if I have enough cheap spells, I'm playing mostly 1 and 2 drops anyways. I'm pretty happy with this.
I mean, I guess if you are playing such an aggressive deck that like your turn 4 is reasonably likely to be 2 drops, this gives you that benefit. I'm not high on this card. I think it's quite bad. I have a hard time thinking of the situation where I'm happy to pick this because of the deck I'm already in. And I'm certainly not going to be picking this and then hoping to build a deck around it. So I don't know where it's showing up for me.
I'm catching this card on the wheel.
Sure.
Unless the aggressive deck is really good, in which case I'm not, but...
So with that said, we're going to move into Mardu Mobilize, which I think we agree is probably the most aggro-leaning clan, but I think it's still very much a mid-range deck. So we'll start with Bonekern Butcher. 1, a red, a white, and a black for a 4/4 demon with Mobilize 2, and attacking tokens you control have Death Touch.
That static kills people.
Yeah, so you're looking for the payoff for Mobilize. This is it. Their blocks are really bad. This is going to feel like a 6/6 swinging in, right, for 4, which,
It really is.
Better than that, honestly.
It might not even attack sometimes if your opponent's got a gummed up board state, but if you've got other things with Mobilize or whatever...
the flying Mobilize creature. Obviously, this is at its best when it gets to attack, and it's just going to be closing out the game relatively quickly. Go ahead and read the dragon for
Dragon Sonic Shrieker is 2, a red, a white, and a black. Dragon, flying 4/4. When this creature enters, it deals 2 damage to any target, and you gain 2 life. If a player is dealt damage this way, they discard a card. There's a lot of value there. You're picking off a creature, you're making your opponent discard a card.
Yeah.
It's a good curve topper.
It feels like every other gold card in this set is an homage to Siege Rhino. And this one very much is, except it's also making them discard a card. And it's got flying instead of trample. This card's going to feel insane and limited. I think, in terms of card quality, both of these Mardu Uncommons are just very, very high quality individual cards.
I don't care where in the Mardu wedge my base is, I'm splashing for these.
And if, I'm not... some of the 3-color cards are asking you a lot in terms of, synergizing with the cards in your deck. Both of these cards are fine in a vacuum. Both of these cards I would play in a different set. They don't need to synergize with them, they're just very strong.
Also, the Mardu Rare plus Sonic Shrieker is your absolute la-la land. Yeah, that's what I want to open one day.
Yeah. So there's a lot of very powerful options here. And with that said, we'll move into the sort of black-white aristocrats, which I think is another very solid pair. And it's worth noting, this does loop back around into Abzan in terms of caring about tokens. So we'll start with Hardened Tactician. 1 a white and a black for a 2/4 human warrior with 1 sacrifice a token, draw a card.
Insanely powerful. We've got tons of tokens in this set and ways to make them... The fact that it only costs 1 mana, they could have very easily made that cost 2 mana.
Yeah.
And just turn all your tokens into clues.
Yeah.
That's just a broken rate. It blocks reasonably well. I'm super thrilled about this card.
Absolutely, yeah. I've got all these tokens that are gonna, sort of outlive their usefulness in the late game. Okay, you block it, great. I'm gonna sack it and draw a card. You don't block it, take the damage, and my second main, I'm gonna sack it and draw a card. Right? This card is sort of a must answer if you have even an okay creature with Mobilize on the battlefield. If you don't, this sucks, but if you, that's not a super high ask.
No, not at all.
Yeah. And then the other black-white aristocrats uncommon is
Marshal of the Lost. 2 a white and a black orc warrior. It's a 3/3 with Death Touch, and whenever you attack, target creature gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of attacking creatures.
Yeah, and for my other 2-headed giant sickos, this is very good in 2-headed giant because it can target your ally's creature, and it also counts all of your allies' attacking creatures because it doesn't say you control. So, look forward to this being a beater in 2-headed giant. But, yeah, I think this card is generally pretty solid. It can target itself. It can target one of your mobilized tokens.
Can it?
Yeah, right.
No, it's because it cannot. I don't think so.
No, whenever you attack target.
But you can stack it such that it does count the mobilized tokens
towards
the +X/+X.
It can count the mobilized token is what I meant, but it cannot target the mobilized token, so it has to target another real creature or itself. And the fact that it can target itself makes it a little bit better.
And it also doesn't have itself to attack to get the trigger. It's whenever you attack. I still think the other one's...
So you leave this up as a blocker.
Yeah, I'm still happier with the other one better.
Yeah. But this one's quite solid. So I think the Black-White Aristocrats deck is going to be an okay base to feel like you're starting from, to then move into either the Mardu or the Abzan deck, which is what these two-color pairs should be in this set. With that said, I think we said this earlier, but it's not going to be like Streets of New Capenna, where that set ended up being more about the ally color pairs and like maybe you're splashing into one of the families. This one, you really want to end up in a clan by the end of the draft, even if it's just a splash. You got to take advantage of those powerful.
That's where they are. You want to be able to have whatever value you can accumulate through that, because a lot of these single color cards are just not as impressive as any of these gold borders.
Yeah. Now, longtime viewers of the channel will know that these limited guides, limited primers, focus on commons and uncommons because that's 90% of the cards you're going to be reading. And it's exciting to fantasize about the rares you might open at pre-release or you might open at draft, but it is not as productive as learning what all of the commons and uncommons do and what the best ones are, because that's most of what you're going to be engaging with. With that said, it is still valuable to know what the best bombs are so you don't accidentally pass them if you have a huge breach of card evaluation skills, just like a moment of confusion, or to know what they are so you know to watch out for them and not get blown out by them.
Yeah, also because most of the time you don't necessarily want to draft a 3-color card, pack one, pick one, but it's important to know what am I okay
this one might be worth it. Yeah.
With. I'm either going to force this or splash into this potentially, and if I have to move away from it later, that's worth the risk of taking this card early.
Right. So we're going to go over those. We're going to take turns reading them, and we're just going to do a quick analysis of each one. We're going to start with the best rares. I'll start with Scavenger Regent. This is 3 and a black for a 4/4 dragon with flying and ward, discard a card, or the Omen.
Not an adventure.
Exude Toxin, sorcery, Omen. Each non-dragon creature gets -XX until end of turn. I think the flexibility on this card just pushes it right into being a bomb, just exactly.
Oh, absolutely, because it's either a great rate creature or a conditional semi-board wipe. There's a lot going on there. Next rare that we think is bomb is Warden of the Grove, 2 and a green, Hydra. At the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Whenever another non-token creature you control enters, it endures X, where X is the number of counters on this creature. Base 2/2, but you have to answer this card absolutely immediately. Otherwise, you're just going to create a large number of tokens. It's other non-tokens, you can't infinitely loop. It doesn't infinitely loop like that.
Yeah, this card does not immediately.
It does not immediately infinitely loop.
Spirit tokens.
But part of the benefit of these two cards, like we've gone over so far, specifically, is that they're monocolored.
Yeah.
So these are really great to first pick because it doesn't commit you to anything super hard.
Yeah, and you might think Warden of the Grove kind of commits you to a deck that cares about counters. It
No.
doesn't. It's just a very good card.
It's just really good.
You have this come down. It's immediately 3/3. And then, on the following turn, you play another guy, you're going to get another free 1/1. Or a counter on that guy, I guess. But, usually a 1/1. And then next we've got Baron Step Siege. 2 a white and a black for an enchantment. As this enchantment enters, choose Abzan or Mardu. Abzan, at the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Mardu, at the beginning of your end step, if a creature died under your control this turn, each opponent sacrifices a creature of their choice. Interesting rules question that came up. If the only thing that you're having die on your turn is your triggers for your mobilized creatures to be sacked, then this Mardu ability actually will not trigger. Because it won't even try to go on the stack because its condition wasn't met. So watch out for that. With that said, if this card didn't give you the choice, both cards would be playable.
Yeah.
Both of these cards are quite solid. The Mardu one especially, they don't have to know about this when they block, because you can cast this in your second main and then go to end step, and oops, you killed one of my creatures, now you have to sacrifice. But even if you're not choosing that, if you're choosing the more just turn your brain off, go face first mode of this enchantment, a counter on every end step spirals out of control so fast.
There's no conditions.
Yeah.
Not creatures that attack. That's nothing. A lot of these sieges are very powerful, but this one's fantastic.
Yeah, I think this is one of the best ones. I think this one and the Golgari one are both insane, and we're going to talk about the Golgari one, obviously. In fact,
there's the Golgari one. Hollow Siege, black and a green, enchantment. As this enchantment enters, choose Sultai or Abzan. Sultai, whenever a counter is put on a creature you control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. Abzan, whenever you attack, put a +1/+1 counter on target attacking creature. It gains menace until end of turn. Again, the Marty version, the Abzan version's better, but...
Yeah, I was going to ask which one are you choosing. This one's a little clearer. I think it is pretty much always the Abzan.
Always Abzan.
Unless you have another copy of Hollow Siege out already choosing Abzan. It's a little tough to make sure you're putting a counter on something every turn. That's a big ask. Whereas the other one just asks you to attack, which, I don't know if you know this, but that's something you do a lot in Limited. This is 2 mana, can come down and immediately start doing its thing. This card's just obviously very good. Anytime you have a creature on the board, this is contributing a ton, and that's just not a big ask. And then we've got New Way Forward. Really interesting art by Eli Manaya here. But it's 2, a blue, a red, and a white for a instant. The next time a source of your choice would deal damage to you this turn, prevent that damage. When damage is prevented this way, New Way Forward deals that much damage to that source's controller, and you draw that many cards.
Yeah, so the great scenario is if it's some type of big dragon, say this Karakik Guardian, because notably this does not interact with hexproof.
It does not, that's cute.
It's choose, not target.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think, we talked a little bit about why fogs are bad and limited, and this is, kind of close to a fog, except, if the thing that you're fogging is 5 damage, they're taking 5, and you're drawing 5 cards.
Yeah, now, am I very sad if my opponent's playing an aggressive deck into this? Yeah, I'm pretty sad about it.
Yeah, I think it depends, yeah. If all their damage is coming from a bunch of little sources, this doesn't feel as good. But even if this is just reflecting 3 damage, it feels great to draw 3 cards at instant speed for 5 mana.
Yeah.
And then this next one is just a messed up Magic card. Go ahead and read this one for
Roar
us.
of Endless Song, 2 green, blue, red. The first 2 chapters of this saga are create a 5/5 green elephant creature token, and then the 3rd chapter, double the power and toughness of each creature you control until end of turn. So now there are 2 10/10 elephants.
Yeah.
That your opponent just has to deal with.
Plus whatever other you had.
Yeah.
There's a cycle
5
of
mana
enchantments, and I don't know if... It is not often that a cycle is this lopsided, because I didn't put any of the other sagas on the...
The Sultai one's quite good.
Some of them are fine.
But,
The Sultai one's fine. Some of them suck. This one is... All the other ones are a little janky and dirtily and, take some time to get going. This one just goes off. It doesn't matter what else you're doing. 5/5 for 5 mana 5/5, and then the next turn you get another 5/5, and then you double all the power and toughness of your creatures. So this card is going to create some unfun scenarios in Limited. This card is going to be responsible for some Reddit posts.
This is what I want in my seeded pack.
Tweets.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Is this why you're picking? Are you picking Teamer?
Yeah, probably.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
I think for the single player, I'm also picking Teamer. But yeah. This is what I'm fantasizing about. This card. Self-evidently busted. Next, we're going to talk about the best Mythic bombs, and we're going to start with this commander-ass card, Elspeth Stormslayer.
It's got a lot of words.
It does. I know. 3 and double white for a 5 loyalty legendary planeswalker, Elspeth. If one or more tokens would be created under your control, twice that many of those tokens are created instead. So, that text box has been on a lot of cards that are $30 for no reason. +1, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token, which, given her ability, is actually
makes 2.
Yeah, 0, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Those creatures gain flying until your next turn. -3, destroy target creature and opponent controls with mana value 3 or greater.
Yeah.
All of these modes have the potential to be instantly relevant.
Phenomenal.
Just an insane card. Yeah, you play this immediately. You play this all the time. It's so busted. It doubles all your harmonize
if I open this in pack 2 and I have some random pile, I'm highly likely to pivot based on this card.
Yeah, if I'm in Teamer.
If I'm in Teamer, I'm
going into Abzan, I guess.
Yeah, I'm in Abzan or I'm in Just Kai, and I'm not happy about it. Or I'm forcing some Bant nonsense. That's not real.
Yeah.
Don't do that. But
this Elspeth will bend the arc of your draft around it. If you're lucky enough to open one in pre-release, you should strongly consider playing white unless you the rest of your white cards were absconded with by some sort of miscreant. You need to read this next one, and I'm sure it's not your first time reading this because it is a classic Magic card being reprinted here in Tarkir.
Amazing. 5 green. Creature beast. 5/5, but it's got haste, and when this creature enters, creatures you control gain trample and get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. So if you ever get to 8 mana, 3 of which is triple green, and you have creatures on the board, you have won the game.
If you have 2 other creatures on the board, this one's the game. For sure. Yeah, this card's great. And then we've got Dragonback Assault. This is going to be another one of just, I think, the most miserable cards in Limited. This does not seem particularly fun to play against. Excuse me. But it's 3 green, blue, red for an enchantment. These Tumor enchantments are going crazy. When this enchantment enters, it deals 3 damage to each creature and each planeswalker. And landfall, whenever a land you control enters, create a 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying.
Mostly a board wipe, and now you get to make a bunch of random flying dragons for free.
Yeah, it turns every late game top deck into gas. You know, if previously if you draw a land in the late game, it's like, this is useless. Now it's a 4/4 flyer. Now it's every land I draw is the best thing on the board. I
mean, ideally, Evolving Wilds is a high pick in the set anyways, but you can get 2 of them.
Yeah, I didn't even think
or
of
the
that.
special guest fetch lands. You can now get 2 4/4 dragons with flying.
Probably fine with playing this card, even if you don't happen to get any special
I am
guest
playing this card
lands.
all of the time, but if you happen to get that...
I didn't put in a slide about the special guest. I don't think it matters very much. The fetch lands are valuable, and obviously they fix your mana, so you should probably take them, mostly just because they're $20 or whatever.
Even if you're only in one of the colors, it is a strict upgrade over a swamp or whatever.
And then the ultimatums are pretty much unplayable. The Jess guy one is the closest one to playable, and it's not good. And then we've got the other 3 best mythic bombs. I believe you get to read this one.
Jeskai Revelation, 4 blue, red, white. For an instant, return target spell or permanent to its owner's hand. Jeskai Revelation deals 4 damage to any target. Create 2 1/1 monk creature tokens with prowess. Draw 2 cards. You gain 4 life. Every mechanic
card
that could ever reasonably be associated with either of those 3 colors is stapled together.
A lot of text on this thing. Thanks for finishing reading it. I wasn't going to, and I still won't. I'll just take my opponent's word for it if they play it against me. In all seriousness, this card's quite good. Obviously, there's too much text on there for it to be bad.
Yeah.
It does a lot of things. It does them at instant speed to prepare for a blowout on the following turn, right?
You've drawn a bunch of cards.
Hitting them in the face, drawing cards, making dudes with prowess. Yeah, this card's insane. Another insane card, and a design that I quite like, Perenation. 3 a white, a black, and a green for a sorcery. Return target permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a hexproof counter and an indestructible counter on it.
You are not getting rid of whatever comes back with this.
Pretty much always a creature.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're going to hope that you're hitting a dragon, or you're hitting something with a lot of relevant keywords. Yeah. Hitting a lifelink creature with this feels great, because that's a constant life swing, even if it's getting blocked, potentially.
You're still getting life. It's great.
Hitting a death touch creature with this is great, because they can just never block it. It's a guaranteed clock. But just hitting any creature with this feels insane. You know, I'm imagining reanimating the common 4/4 that endures 3 when it comes in. Now I've got a 7/7 Death Touch Indestructible Reach. Indestructible Reach Hexproof. I think this card's insane. And then you get this next one.
I get Irene the Song Unending, considering the cycle of absolutely busted teamer cards. 5 green, blue, and red. Legendary creature, Spirit Dragon, 10/10. Flying. Protection from white and from black. When Irene enters, it deals X damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures and or planeswalkers your opponents control, where X is the number of lands you control. Yeah, this card's busted.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how they've finally figured out how to design a big busted creature without making it good in Legacy Reanimator, because it cares about the number of lands you control. With that said, casting this in Limited, it is pretty much a one-sided board wipe. on a 10/10 body
that you can't kill. There is Sarkhan's Resolve. There's like one green common that says destroy target creature with flying, and other than that, the only way to get rid of this is to block it with a large dragon and to pair that with like a 5 damage based spell.
Yeah.
Once this guy comes down, you're just
it's over.
It's over.
It's over. Yeah. And he kills the big dragon that's supposed to fly.
Exactly.
Yeah. This card's great. It is 8 mana. 8 mana is a lot to ask, but if you get to 8 mana, I can't.
We have some ramp in this
set.
set.
Spend it on.
Yeah.
Well, I can Craterhoof Behemoth, but this is also very good.
If I don't have a board state, this is infinitely better than Craterhoof Behemoth.
Well, when you have both of these cards in your hand at pre-release, which I'm sure you will.
Cool. And if I have 8 mana, I'm casting the Already first, probably.
On whether you have creatures on your board or not. So yeah, Already's very good, obviously. I don't know why we spent this much time talking about it. It's an insane card. If you feel like we left out any rare mythic bombs that you think are going to put in work in this pre-release, drop them in the comments. Yeah, and now we're going to talk about some tips and tricks. And we've touched on this a lot throughout, but essentially you're going to want to start in a color pair and then move into a clan. I put personally what I think is the safest color pair that I'm going to feel the best about starting in, but you want to start in these enemy color pairs. If you look at the back of a Magic card, it is the colors that are the furthest away from a color. So, for instance, green and black.
Yeah, non-adjacent color pairs.
Yeah, non-adjacent, there you go. So in this instance, the example we're giving is going from Golgari into either Abzan or Sultai, so you have that sort of flexibility early in the draft before you get into a clan. But the same goes for, like, Simic into Temur or Jeskai, for example. Temur or Sultai, for instance. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of the same idea as in a regular draft. You kind of want to pick out your first color based on whatever commons or uncommons are strong and then go into a second color. You can kind of apply a little bit of that logic here of you're just either picking a really strong uncommon in a color pair or you're picking a really strong common in one color and you want a little bit more information. Both of those are really going to be great drafting strategies.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's tricolor cards that you can first pick a little bit more speculatively,
sure.
But in general, you want to try and just pick really good, solid cards, and then see what's more open, find your way to a clan eventually, but you do want to find your way there.
Yeah, I think if you're drafting a wedge set, you can kind of think of enemy color pairs as colors to start in the same way that in New Capenna, you can think of, like, I'm going to start in Selesnya, and then I might be in Bant or Naya. Yeah. Next we're going to talk about dragon synergies, and I'll let you kind of take the reins on this one, because you're super into the dragon synergies in this
I'm into the dragon synergies. I think they're very good. It's because every deck is going to play dragons. Mm-hmm. Whether that's because of these Omen cards in your aggressive deck. I mean, the 2 dragons you put up here, Twin Moss Stormbrood and Purging Stormbrood, those I think are
the strongest ones.
Those are the 2 strongest Omen cards. Both halves of both of these cards are great. Mm-hmm. I'm happy to play them in any deck that's at least one of those colors, preferably both. But, I mean, Caustic Exhale...
I think I'm definitely going to play Charring Bite in a deck that's not white.
Oh, yeah, completely.
I'm happy to play Twin Moss Stormbrood there.
A lot of the Exhale cards are just really good on rate, even if you don't behold a dragon. Some of these Dragonstorms, I mean, Teeming Dragonstorm, I think is quite good, because it can make a lot of dudes. You're playing some of these white dragons anyways, as curve toppers in your decks, because they have those omens. You're allowed to do that a lot more than you're allowed to play clunky 5 and 6 drops in most normal sets.
Sure.
So I think they're going to be really huge value pieces.
Yeah, so the fact that it has the flexibility from that omen sort of giving you permission to play the jankier half of the card that's going to be relevant some of the time. Mm-hmm. I am not super high on these Dragonstorms. I do think the white one is going to be the strongest, and I think you agree with that, but the black one just seems rough, and the green one seems too commandery, too cute.
The green one can be, like, quite good if you're in that Temur or if you're splashing a 4th color or something.
I mean,
it will have its uses.
If I'm trying to live the dream and cast Urani, I'm pretty happy
you need this.
But I'm not always going to be doing that. I'm not super high on these, but I do understand where you're coming from. I just think you will not, when you fan out a pack, you're not going to have as many dragons in there as you think you are.
No.
And I think there are going to be plenty of limited decks where you just don't have a dragon at all.
It's not like a dragon's deck. It's just something to take advantage of if you have the opportunity.
Like, I just don't feel super optimistic about taking a card that cares about dragons and evaluating it as anything other than I'll never have a dragon. Which I think the Exhale passes that test a lot of the time, but I don't think any of the Dragonstorms really do, so I'm reticent to sign on to saying those are good cards. But we'll see how the format shakes out. You know?
Yeah.
This is definitely a complicated format. There's a lot of meat on the bones, and there's a lot of things to be wrong about or to be right about or to discover as the set unfolds.
I'm excited for it. I know my evaluation is going to totally change. I'm ready for the 17 lands data, ready to play some cards.
As am I. So, with that said, we'll talk about the limited fixing next, and there's a lot of it. We've got these life lands, which are sort of perennial, returning cycle of fixing that's in a lot of sets where they want you to play 3 colors. Just enter tapped, gain a life. Not much.
There's all 10 of them in this set. Yeah. The ones in the enemy color pairs are obviously going to be a little bit higher picks because they fit in 2 clans, whereas the ones that are ally ones will fit in 1. But they're still very high picks, especially pack 1 or before you kind of settle into your final clan. It gives you a lot of flexibility to take lands earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we've got Evolving Wilds.
Yeah, called that out earlier.
Yeah.
Take it early, take it often.
Gotta trigger that enchantment twice.
Okay, it fetches for any color.
Yeah, it's also just good.
It's good.
It's just funny that that's like a hidden synergy, because that card needs to be better. And then the cycle of tapped 3-color lands: Frontier Bivouac, Nomad Outpost, Siege Citadel, and Opulent Palace, Mystic Monastery.
Yeah, that's way more than I could name.
Yeah,
that's impressive.
I don't know if I can probably do the ally. It doesn't matter. I don't know if I got the Abzan one right. Sandstep Citadel. Anyway, these has Siege Rhino on the brain. These are all in the set, and I think the important thing to remember is, like, if I'm just in blue-green, I take Frontier Bivouac.
I'm happy
and then I play this in a Sultai deck, because it gives me 2 of my colors. So these are basically strictly better, almost, or you should look at them in Limited as though they're strictly better than a lifeland that features 2 of those colors, because you're potentially taking that away from someone who does care about all 3 of those colors, or who cares about a different 2 of the colors than you do, and it is acting as a dual land for 2 of your colors, maybe all 3. If that happens, it's Magical Christmas Land, right? Having one of these in your deck increases the number of hands you don't have to mulligan by a ton.
Yeah.
So these cards are just generally good. And then we don't have to read all the monuments, but just read one of these and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, they're all 2 generic mana artifacts. When this artifact enters, search your library for a basic card of one of the 3 colors of the land. So for the Smarty Monument, it's Mountain, Plains, or Swamp. Reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. And then they all have different activated abilities for like 1 or 2 mana, and then all 3 of the colors in that wedge. So this Mardu one says 2 red, a white, and a black. Sacrifice this artifact. Create 3 1/1 red warrior creature tokens. They gain menace and haste until end of turn, and they're all only as a sorcery.
Yeah, and I believe they all make creatures. The Tamer one makes a 5/5. The Sultai one makes 2 2/2s. So they all make different stats of creatures for different costs. How do you feel about these?
I think they're going to be dependent heavily on format speed. If the aggressive deck is good, these are going to get way worse.
Yeah.
If you think it's mid-range slop, then these are going to be fantastic. Because it gets you your color fixing, it's generic, you can cash it in later for some tokens, so it's not terribly too far down the line, you're not getting nothing out of these cards.
Yeah, I mean, I think I generally agree. I think that the Teamer one makes a 5/5, and I think it costs like 6 to crack. That's probably the best one for if the format is friendly to these sorts of cards. Overall, I think they're fine. I don't love taking a turn essentially off to cast this.
Pick your lands before these, for sure.
Right. But if you have to, these feel a lot better than playing, like, the Flags or whatever from original Tarkir. And those were fine in that set. They were passable. You don't generally love to take Mana Rocks in Limited. And these are definitely a cut above Mana Rocks. But, yeah, I think they're fine. I think you just take the Tri-lands over them. Sometimes you take the Lifelands over them as well. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then you wanted to talk about the devotees, which I initially read as divorcee. So, Abzan divorcee. 1, add white, black, or green, activate only if it's your weekend with the kids.
I really like this cycle. I think they're excellent, specifically because it's fixing that doesn't cost you a lot to play. The Jeskai Devotee and the Murder Devotee are the worst ones by far. A, because Jeskai is really bad, But the Sultai Devotees got Death Touch, that's a great ability,
Yeah,
so
you
it can
trade
trade
it
off
off once you're
later,
done with the fixing.
once you've gotten your cards. This Abzan being able to return from the graveyard to your hand is going to be great to trigger abilities or sacrifice abilities, so it's really thematically powerful. And then this Teamer one is a fantastic blocker into your aggressive deck, so you can have the time, it buys you a ton of time to be able to play your actual big spells that cause you to win the game. Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm casting my already.
Yeah, or I guess your 6-drop Karkik guy. I think...
So all of these devotees, like specifically the Sultai Devotees, sometimes made my original list of some of the best commons. But
yeah, I don't think any of these crack best commons for me. I think the one that's the closest is Abzan, personally. I will say I don't love the fixing being on a body that you can remove and that costed a specific one of the mana, right? Because if I'm in, let's say, a Teamer deck and I need to fix for all 3 colors, but I have red and green, then this is not useful to me in the way that, like, the Monument is. And the fact that if my opponent removes it, like, I can't have been depending on this, and the fact that you can't depend on it makes it worse as far as fixing. You know, I've kept enough Llanowar Elves dependent hands in Pioneer against decks with Fatal Push, and I will never learn. I'm going to keep doing it, but, like, you know, I've been burned by that before, so these kind of reek of that to me, which makes me feel like maybe you only play them if you would play them without that fixing ability. And I think that's true of at least Abzan and Sultai and maybe Timur.
Yeah, those are just good cards on rate. I don't want to be in Jeskai to begin with. I'm not interested in a bear. But as far as creature-based fixing goes, the fact that it doesn't tap, the fact that it's not even during your turn, so if for some reason you need to filter on an opponent's turn, it can do that. There's a lot of great value to these cards.
Yeah, and I don't know if this factored into your analysis, but Mardu Devotee kind of looks like Liam Neeson. So
that did not factor into my analysis.
So that's the end of our limited fixing tips and tricks. But the last tip and trick we want to talk about is, you know, they haven't done these in a while. Streets of New Capenna was the last time they did these.
I've never had one in paper.
You have never had one of these in paper. They did them for original Tarkir. They do them for the Ravnica sets when the guilds come around. They did them for original Theros. But these pre-release have what is called a seeded pack, where when you get your kit, your store might handle this differently. They might give them first come, first serve. They might let you sign up ahead of time for what clan you want. But essentially, when you get your pre-release kit, it's not just going to be a Dragons of Tarkir pre-release kit. It's going to be a clan pre-release kit. So they have the Mardu, the Teamer, the Abzan, the Jeskai, and the Sultai. And you get to pick your kit, and it's not just going to have a different color die in it. One of the packs is going to only include cards of that clan. And I believe that means cards within that clan's colors and that don't have another clan's watermark. So I believe you cannot, for example, get green and black renew cards in the Abzan.
I think so. There's been a few of them that have been open on like YouTube channels online, and I haven't seen anything to contradict with that. There will also be a couple lands in that seeded pack. A tri-land, and either a second tri-land or a life land.
Yeah, and we've only seen some packs open, but all of them so far, at the time that I saw in the Reddit thread that I looked at, all of them had a tri-land and a devotee. Mm-hmm. So the devotee is maybe more likely to be a fluke that they all happen to have one, but that might be in all of them. Either way, it's going to fix you for that clan, and it's going to give you some decent commons and uncommons to play that clan. Some people... So this is only going to be the case for pre-release. If you do any sealed RCQs of this set, you're just going to be getting 6 packs of the set, obviously. And I think that is better for competitive events, especially because if your rest of your pool does not jive with your seeded pack, you're going to have a really crappy pool. But it is fun to kind of, and more friendly to newer players to kind of, okay, this is the clan I like, this is the seeded pack that I'm going to pick, and it's going to kind of help me build my deck for me, give me a jump start into what I want to do.
Yeah, and maybe you're not in that clan, but maybe you're in something that overlaps in 2 of the 3 colors.
Sure.
So it's not total loss.
Or that you can move into another clan because it shares a color. With that said, Jess, how many pre-releases are you doing for this set?
1, and then 1 2-headed giant.
Okay, have you decided what clans you're going to pick for those?
I'm probably going to pick Teamer for the single person. I haven't thought about 2-headed giant yet. That's like a couple hours beforehand. I'm going to Scryfall search for everything with the word each, and then I'm going to figure it out for that.
Good call. I've already done that. So I do think with seeded packs generally, and this is get a little inside baseball, I don't know how many of you love Two-Headed Giant like I do, but generally with these seeded pack sets in Two-Headed Giant, you should both take the same seeded pack so that one of your decks is absurdly good. That has never failed me thus far. It's generally what you want to do. So I think personally, I'm playing 3 single player pre-releases and a Two-Headed Giant. I'm doing all of them this weekend. I'm just so excited.
You're crazy.
For the set. Yeah. So for the single player, I at least want to do Teamer and Sultai once each. Probably do a little more Teamer. And then for Two-Headed Giant, my partner and I are going double Mardu. Or sorry, double Abzan.
I was like, yeah, you want your Siege Riders.
Double Abzan because there's a lot of each within the black-white. And then Skirmish Rhinos has each on it, so maximizing the number of copies of Skirmish Rhino that will be in our collective pool is definitely in our interest. I don't know if that's objectively the best thing to be doing, but it's very fun.
Yeah, we'll make that determination. Don't pick Jeskai if you want to speculate on if Marty's really good, or if you think the Abzan rares you want to open a copy of Paranation, you can do that. But I'm in Team Reliant.
Jeskai had a lot of Bond rares in our Bond list. It had
it did.
Yeah, it had the Deflecting Palm, and you also draw that many cards, and it had the Yu-Gi-Oh card that does a bunch of shit for 7 mana. And it also had some very powerful uncommons. I'm thinking specifically the Haste Dragon. I think that's my favorite of the uncommon dragons. That draws a card when it hits somebody and you gain a life. Or is it when it attacks?
It hits someone, yeah.
It's going to hit, generally speaking. So I think, Jeskai's... We've dogged a lot on Jeskai in the set review.
Yeah, if it ends up being great, then I'll look really stupid. But
well, I'm gonna hedge my bets by saying those 2 rares are good, and also that uncommon is good, which is basically the same thing as being right.
I just want to steal the good uncommons from Jeskai and then play them in Teamer.
Yeah,
is my plan for that.
Yeah.
But
so all that said, I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank my special guest, Jess.
Yes, thank you for having me on
the show today. If you found their insight helpful, or if you didn't, go ahead and let them know in the comments.
I accept hate mail, so put that hate mail in the comments.
Tweet at them at Subway Canada.
And I don't have a Twitter, so good luck.
You should make a Twitter so that I can tag you when I post this. All that said, thank you so much for watching. I always appreciate likes, comments, subscribes, etc. I know it's mostly my friends that watch this channel, but there are some others. So thank you out there, and feel free to help me extend the reach of this video. And I just love to have a discussion. So let me know in the comments what you think we got wrong, what you think are the best cards in the set, what you're most excited about, what clan are you rocking at pre-release? Are you representing the Abzan? Are you rocking with the Mardu? Are you Sultai enjoyer? Are you a big Teamer head? Did you eat a lot of glue as a child? Let us know. And thank you for watching.
Yeah.
And I'm rambling now, so we're going to shut it off.
Thank you. Yeah, best of luck with your pre-releases. Hopefully this has been helpful.